Welcome to the Passive House Podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, stories, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out the articles, videos, and more at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, join the community forum, and of course, attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House Podcast. Welcome back to episode 14 of the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh. I'm in Auckland, New Zealand. How are you, Zack?
I'm well. I'm in Seattle and doing just fine.
Things starting to cool down there.
They are. It's been rainy, which is just great. We like the rain. It keeps it green. Yeah, it's good.
And I was reflecting this morning. I was out for a run. I was listening to the news, and there's lots of craziness out there. Certainly here, though, there's a lot of building still going on.
Yeah, same with us. Yeah, I mean, we actually some restrictions have been tightened in the state of Washington by Governor Jay Inslee just this last couple of days. At this point, construction, there haven't been more restrictions on construction, so it's continuing apace.
Yeah. And I know that I just acknowledge that there are a lot of people doing it tough out there, and I know that in your particular case, there's issues around funding and subsidies for people who have lost their jobs. But I'm also encouraged, particularly in a lot of the architects I'm speaking to, that there is a lot of that design work that is carrying on and continuing, and some really good work, people thinking about how do we build buildings better as well. You know, are there lessons to be learnt from this experience, this whole year, really?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It's definitely been a time of kind of shaking up assumptions and re-examination for sure. And we were just talking about we've gotten some hopeful news about vaccines, and so fingers crossed that we'll be moving toward a place where we can rebound, and hopefully rebound in a green way as much as possible. So green shoots.
Tell us about your guest for this week.
Yeah, this is really fun. Tessa Smith, now Tessa Bradley, is a good friend of mine. She's been a pioneer of Passive House in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. For the last decade. And at a young age, she became co-owner of the Artisans Group, which at the time was a design-build firm. It's now a design-only firm. And the Artisans Group quickly became a leading designer and builder of really beautiful, modernist, but affordable Passive House homes in the Northwest. And so they won a bunch of design awards in the process. And I think Tessa has probably won more Best Project by a Young Professional Under 35 awards from FIAS than anyone else. It feels like she wins every year. She's a great designer. She's a great communicator about Passive House, and a really smart entrepreneur. And we touch on all of that, plus the Artisans Group's forays into prefab design in our conversation. There's one term that I failed to define during the interview, and that's TI. And TI, for folks who aren't in the US, stands for tenant improvement, which is essentially a commercial remodel of a space. So enjoy our conversation. So Tessa, thanks so much for being part of this and joining me. I have admired your work, as you know, for many years. And so it's really great to be able to have you on the podcast. And I was hoping that we could start by, sharing your story about Passive House a little bit, your journey to finding Passive House, and just the origin story of Tessa Smith, Tessa Bradley now. in passive house design.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I actually started with a technical degree in drafting and worked for some architects in town in my late teenage years. Actually got that first degree when I was 16. So I was working for architects in town as a drafter and got really passionate about architecture and went back to school, went to the Evergreen State College and got my liberal arts degree in sustainable design. And just about the time I was graduating there, I was working for the Artisans Group doing residential design. And of course, it was 2008, 2009, and bottom dropped out and everybody panicked and everyone was sort of looking around for the next best thing to do with their time. And a friend told me about Katrin Klingenberg going to be speaking at the Green Lake Library in Seattle. And so I trudged up there and listened to her speak and felt really, really impassioned by the time she was done. And I went up and talked to her and told her I was going to sign up for her training. And she was like, yeah, great, do it. And I did. And I was off and running into passive house. And then my now business partner, Randy Foster, got really interested in it as well and also took the training. And just about that time, I bought in and became a 50% owner of the Artisans Group. And the rest was kind of history. We were design build for many, many years. I think maybe about 8 years of passive house building, and built a lot of passive house homes. Did a lot of that work. I think we did the second or third finished one in the state of Washington. And it was really, really wonderful times. It was really fun to be a contractor. And it was fun to do it in the beginning when you couldn't really source a lot of the things we needed. So we couldn't find a door manufacturer to make a passive house door. So we built one ourselves. And there was a lot of kind of bootstrap solutions to things like that were pretty fun, especially when you're young and energetic and that isn't overwhelming. That's like a challenge. And now these days, we've transitioned into just being an architecture firm. Bruce Cassell came on as a third owner and principal. She's another architect that works with Randy and I. And so the three of us have just been mostly doing architecture for the last 2 years. We shut down the construction side of our business. We helped several of our employees launch their own construction firms, and many of them do passive house work now. And we've really gotten to spread our wings and broaden the markets we can serve by being just an architecture firm. And we've gotten really busy with a lot of really exciting passive house or passive house related work. So it's been a good journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to dive into that. Just before we do, so that first, the training that happened right after the Green Lake presentation that Katrin Klingenberg did, that was one of the very first. Was it the second wave of?
Second wave. So it was the one that wasn't in Urbana, Illinois, and it was the first one they'd ever done away from Urbana, is my understanding. And I met a lot of greats there. Dan Whitmore, sat next to him for much of my training, became friends. Of course, Graham Irwin, who went through the earlier training in Urbana, was helping Katrin teach the class.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Cool. Yeah.
And I know I'm remembering tons of my favorite people, but lots of the folks that you see now were in that course. And it was really fun. It was really scary. They hadn't translated the any of the training manuals into English yet. So we didn't have any reference materials.
Wow.
And, our exam that we took had been poorly translated from German. So there was a lot of questions about what exactly did they mean when they said this sort of things. And it was definitely early, but it was so fun. And, Katrin was just her usual self, being a kick-ass lady, doing a great job. And, she got a whole room of us to start doing them before, we really had the tools to start doing them, it felt like. But it worked.
Yeah, well, in the Northwest, at least for a while, I don't know that we can claim this anymore, but maybe we can. But the Northwest was definitely one of the early hotspots, and it was a lot of single-family passive house projects that were happening.
Yeah, I think Dan started his first, his project up in Seattle, and then I think Joji and Petro was right on his heels with the Mini Bee.
Right.
And then I think we were just after that.
And how did you sell Passive House to your clients? I think I think I've heard you tell this story a little bit, and I think it's a good one.
Well, I think maybe we came at it a little differently than some of the people I trained with. I think maybe just because I have a hard time thinking about passive houses, maybe in the same terms as your average passive house consultant. I'm not super great at spreadsheeting. I'm not a linear thinker. I wouldn't even say math is my strong suit. So, the way I was thinking about these buildings was sort of, it's a normal building wrapped in a big woolly sweater with, these 5 things that make it better. And so when we would sit down with a client, it wasn't, well, you're going to have, 4.75 kilo BTUs per square foot per year. There was no language like that. It was, I would sit down and I would draw a little picture of a house, and then I would wrap a big woolly blanket around it. And then I would draw the sun coming in, and then I would put a little HRV in the wall. And I would go, this is the best way that I know to make you a house. And by best, I mean measurably better, healthier, more comfortable, better for the environment. And that, I would say that was really how we were selling them. And of course, you've got the client that wants to deep dive with you occasionally. And, we have the technical know-how and the resources to do that as well. But I feel like we kind of got out of our own way early, simply because, I wasn't smart enough to
yeah, whatever.
to go there.
But it was, it does stand out in terms of the way that people are communicating about Passive House in the, like 8 years ago, the work that you and Randy were doing to talk about the experiential benefits that Passive House brings instead of geeking out, which is so easy to do because there's so much to geek out on.
And it's so fun. And I love doing that with other architects. I just think we've done a good job of not doing that with our clients.
Absolutely. And so what portion of your portfolio do you think has been Passive House? And is that shifting, or does it come and go?
I would say, our firm is interesting in that we're about 50-50. Only about 50% of our work is residential and has been for the last probably 3 or 4 years. And the other half is a lot of light commercial and hospitality work. So we do a ton of restaurants and bars, cafes, bakeries, marketplaces with lots of little businesses. We're doing a church right now, and a pharmacy, so we do a lot of that kind of work. And I would say, unfortunately, of that work, not a lot of it's Passive House or even leaning towards that. Most of it is I would say more standard construction. A lot of it's TIs. So then we're really focused on, this project, the scope of work isn't going to be the shell. And so what can we do with the materials or the energy systems we are affecting to make the building more comfortable or more sustainable? And if we're not really able to get into that piece of it, then I really focus on what local craftsmen can we use. Okay, so we're really just doing a TI that's like cabinets. Okay, well, what's a local sustainable cabinet maker we can use? And it's really focusing on what you can reach for. But the other 50% of our work in our residential realm, I would say about probably 60 or 70% is Passive House. And I would say the rest of that work, we haven't done a code built home in a very long time. I would say the other 40% of that work, 30% of that work is net zero energy or approaching it or better than code, or maybe non-certified, something that's, approaching Passive House. I don't think people really come to us residentially for code built work anymore.
Right. And at least for the projects that are in the state of Washington, code is pretty good. It's all relative, of course, but if you look across the United States, Washington State Energy Code is one of the best. And
getting more stringent, right? The changes that are coming out, I think really propel us to being, maybe 70% of the way to Passive House if you really look at what they're asking for. I'm sure that there will be ways to figure out how to shortchange that because there's always a way.
That's the game.
That's the game. But, I think the intent of that code is actually to get to something that very much resembles heading towards Passive House. Yeah,
well, at least the stated goal is by 2030 that the Washington State Energy Code will be, what is it? Here, we can geek out a little bit. That energy use intensity of new buildings in 2031 will be 70% better than new buildings were in 2006. So if you look at the energy use intensity of buildings in 2006 and improve it by 70%, you're getting down to an EUI of like around 20, 15, 20, 25. It depends on the building.
Which that starts to be like passive house zone to me. Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah. So we need to
definitely saw it come up in our, which I'm sure we'll get into later. We've been working for some local cities to develop ADU plans, and so we kind of tried to be a little forward thinking with those as much as we could, to try and address the coming energy code changes and sort of slip our little passive house ideas in here and there where we could.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that. I know that, and related to that is the prefab, the whole prefab world, prefab model that I know that you are engaged in. So, tell me about that.
Yeah. So, well, they're kind of, in my mind, they're kind of separate topics. So let's do the prefab first, because this is just very fun and exciting. But we have been doing a vast majority of our custom homes as prefabricated designs. We've worked with a lot of good companies, like, Chris Corson's amazing and he's doing awesome work. We have mostly lately been working with Collective Carpentry, which is a little bit more local to us and just up in Canada, and a small outfit, and they've been doing a really great job on our work. And so we've got one project almost complete with them, and another one near Portland that's coming off the ground soon. And we've had a really wonderful experience with both of those.
Incidentally, we just had both Chris and Jan on the at the prefab summit that we just held last week.
Yeah. Co-principal Russo is telling me that was awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun, super fun. We're actually going to do another one on December 14th.
Oh,
yeah. So actually, we should. I want to talk to you about that, but we should do that offline. But anyway, I interrupted, but it's exciting. These are pioneers in this space. So
I agree. Well, and what I like, and oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying this. So please, if I've offended you, you can email Graham Irwin at graham@essentialhabitat.com. But what I like about the prefab people is it seems like they're all sort of starting to develop similar products. Like I'm starting to see more similarities amongst the wall assemblies and amongst the approach than I ever have in this industry, which I get excited about because, the more that not that I don't believe in, creativity and innovation, but the more that we can streamline that, the better it's going to be for everyone in this space.
What are you seeing as where are things coalescing?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of TJI walls, where there's an interior, sometimes it's structural, sometimes it's not, essentially layer, which is almost like an installation layer on the inside of the building, 2x4s or something. And then I'm seeing a lot of the TJI walls on the outside and a lot of the TJI prefabricated roofs, which we're getting more and more adept at and using more and more on our own passive house work, whether it's prefab or not. And I feel like that for us is a big, it's really hard to ask a client to do prefab off the bat when they don't have a design. But, in a perfect world, you would design their design to be prefabricated. So we're kind of making these judgments along the way of, okay, well, you're really interested in prefabricated, but you're not positive you're going to build that way. So we try to design the building with those design constraints. And then when it comes down to, the moment of truth, if we designed assemblies that can be prefabricated easily or built in the field easily, which that TJI kind of crossover tends to be both, then I feel like we can massage the design and work the technical aspects into being prefab more easily than if we have a completely different assembly or approach and decide to go prefab later, maybe even, without the client, having determined that early in the process. So I like that flexibility because there's a lot of reasons why you might or might not go prefab. most of which are out of our control, and really on the client to determine, or the general contractor to determine. So I like that flexibility and that consistency between whether we do or don't with our assemblies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think I interrupted you as you were in the flow of talking about how prefab is developing for you. So you mentioned a couple of projects that are coming up now. What else? What's on the horizon prefab wise for you?
A lot of custom home residential work. We've got a couple on Bainbridge Island, a couple projects. We've got, a couple passive houses around us regionally, a couple more in Portland coming together. I definitely think that I would say at least probably 50% of our custom home work is going to be prefabricated in 2021, maybe more.
Wow. Yeah.
For us, we've kind of been passive house prefab junkies for a while. Randy and I, with a friend, started like a passive house prefab company kind of in 2010, sort of as a hobby. It didn't go particularly well. We did a couple projects and we're like, oh man, this just requires more volume than we can put energy into producing. And so we didn't pursue it any further. But, I think we've had the passion, but haven't had the right resources up until this year. And now I feel a ton of momentum. I see all these great prefab companies, and there's a lot of similarities into what they're doing. And it feels like there might actually be momentum enough to do this now.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's super interesting because it tightly kind of matches the conversation we had last week on the podcast with Pete Bielski, who's based in New Zealand and actually cut his teeth on construction in Germany as part of a company that was doing like 900 prefabricated homes a year, and then tried to do the same in New Zealand and apply passive house to it, but has moved back to just more the more typical build approach because of the volume issue. I mean, it's just like it just requires more volume. We couldn't, there wasn't enough of we didn't have I think you would have to be very well funded. We were not well funded enough to float the development of a large company and buy all the equipment and really push that volume. Oh, that's right. It was called Big Walls. Albert Rooks and Randy and I briefly formed Big Walls, awesome.
Called Big Walls. I did not name it. I thought it was quite silly and made fun of them for it for several years on end. But we did a couple of projects, and it's just you need to have an entire company focused on that and have good liquidity to pull it off. And I love watching all these people like Chris Corson and like Jan and Collective Carpentry being really successful and doing great work. That's really exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's really inspiring. The summit where there were 6 different companies involved, and this upcoming one with there are another half dozen that are eager to tell their story as well, and it's good to see.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of instead of really, really big companies sort of gobbling up the market share, there's all these slightly different ways and slightly different means to do it. It does seem like there's going to be a degree of regionalism to some of the assemblies. Like all us Northerners kind of can do the same thing, and then it seems like there might be a different solution for like the southern half of the country or something. But although I think Jonah's doing really cool stuff with need-based design.
Yeah.
He's doing really cool prefab.
I'm hoping they'll be involved in the next summit. I think that's likely. Cool. And so I know you're also doing a whole bunch of ADU stuff and have been been part of this public process to share plans, and what's going on with that?
Well, that I would say that's really come out of we're a small company and we have a lot of fun, and we love spending time together, and we're all friends, and we all have a lot of similar passions. And so Passive House, overlaps really well with that because we're all really passionate about the environment and better building science. But then the other piece of that, of course, is missing middle housing and the housing crisis. And I was in an AIA roundtable discussion about ADUs the other day, and I can't substantiate this statistic, but it was shared by an AIA representative I trust, and they said that architects actually qualify for low income housing when they
I believe it.
when they exit college with their degrees, and they're going to make what they're going to make working.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting. That's kind of been one of our motivations. We're a small collective of single moms and creative types and people that want to have time and resources to pursue the things that make us happy, and that isn't just money. So we really got involved in the policy in our local Olympia jurisdiction because it's very weird, but there is a really strong contingent here that has managed to, through mass marketing, make what the policies they want to see happen, which in my opinion are pretty short-sighted and in many cases very racist, happen, and they're very anti-missing middle, and they've managed to make that anti-missing middle seem like a liberal agenda, seem like the liberal voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had to do a ton of work in education and in outreach just to educate people that that having the zoning in your neighborhood change is actually a good thing for your neighborhood, and all those this is how you get nice things, all those things you like the walkable coffee shops that people that we design that people love, and the little local grocery store and the little pizza joint on the corner. That's all about rooftops. That's all about density. And if you have more housing types, then your neighbors might not just be other rich white people, which should be great for everyone and great for the neighborhood. So that has been a really long journey for us. And we're just now seeing that policy begin to get traction in Olympia. And so part and parcel to the policy work we've been doing with a group locally called OPOP, Olympians for People-Oriented Places, which is a group that tries to be civilly active and promote the kind of development we do want to see in our region. So in addition to that, we also got applied for a competitive process, and were selected as the architecture team to design ADUs for the city of Lacey. So this is really cool.
I just realized I should interrupt and say that for people who aren't aware, ADU is accessory dwelling unit, which can be a backyard cottage, which in Seattle we call a detached accessory dwelling unit. Or ADUs can also be like a basement flat or that sort of thing. So anyway, please continue.
Lacey, to my knowledge, they're the only city that's done this, at least in the state of Washington too, which I love that they're a small jurisdiction and they were wonderful to work with and really innovative. So Lacey did this all call and said, we want to work with an architecture firm. We have this small modicum of money to participate with, and we want ADU designs that we can give people that live within our city limits for free. So they paid us to develop them. We helped them market them. We created 2 very modest, very flexible designs with sort of optional energy efficient detailing available in the set. They're very simple sets. Like I said, very modest designs. And then Olympia and Tumwater actually were able to negotiate some inter-office agreements to hop on their contract with us. And we were able to get a little bit more resources, and we were able to develop 2 more designs. So now we've got 4 designs that all 3 cities, Lacey, Tumwater, and Olympia, can all use.
Nice.
And so we've been pretty excited about that. They're going to be delivered in the next few weeks, and then each city will begin, their marketing push. Lacey's already got their 2 that they started with live, and they vet people that come in, and if they determine that their lot can support an ADU and that it's a reasonable use for their property, they'll allow them to select one of the plan sets, and they'll give them, that plan set to walk out the door with, and with a permit, essentially.
Wow.
Go meet with the contractor.
Yeah.
So I've really liked that approach. And I think that it just removes one more barrier. We also were one of the selected firms that competed for the ADU work in Seattle. But their process is a little bit different. We weren't compensated for that. We just prepared the plans and put them up on a website, and then people pay us $1,000. Seattle essentially set the price. So they pay us $1,000 per usage of the plan set. That's also, just a fledgling project, and I'm excited to see where that goes. But you can see the ADUs we developed for them on their website with some other really cool firms that did that work as well.
Now, not that I'm asking for personal benefit or anything, but I do live in Seattle. Does the city also do that same sort of vetting for your lot?
I am less familiar with the Seattle process.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy the set from us. If you live in the city limits, you can buy the set from us all day long. No problem.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure what the process looks like from their side.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that they are pre-approved, so the permitting should be relatively easy. But I imagine that you still have to go through all the machinations of the site reviews and everything.
Right.
When you go in.
Got it.
Yeah. I haven't actually had one bought and permitted there yet, so I feel like I'll know more once we do one.
Nice. Very cool. That's exciting work, and it is super important. And it's ironic that NIMBY, not in my backyard, is applied to, or that backyard cottages could be the the solution to breaking through NIMBY bias or I mean, it's just so frustrating. But it is a way to kind of sneak in density.
It is,
which is so important.
I feel like it's really in Olympia, at least, it's a very local fight, right? I feel like the NIMBYism is very centered around the big bad developer coming. That's how they make it seem
progressive.
Being progressive, it's the big bad developer is going to come in and put cottages and ruin your neighborhood. And it's like, no this isn't a money making, program. No developer is interested in putting ADUs in anyone's backyard. I mean, this would be very small scale development for, really person to person relationship based rentals.
Yeah.
Or what have you. And, it's very hard for me to find the logic in the argument for this would be wonderful. This would be wonderful for any neighborhood that it could happen to. But we are making progress. They have adopted new zoning code, and assuming that we did get ADU code adopted a year or two ago, but it got overturned by the NIMBYs. They found a clerical error in the process, and we're hoping to make better progress this time. They're also doing, zoning where you can do small townhouse developments on corner lots, little triplexes that can be, turned into townhomes and things like that. Like really, a lot more kind of form-based code where everything fits into the scale of the neighborhood, and that's what makes it work. It doesn't really matter what kind of housing typology it is, as long as it's fitting into the scale of the neighborhood. So I'm liking all of that. Very excited about it. We actually are doing feasibility on a net zero energy three-part townhouse, triple unit townhouse for a small like one-off developer kind of in Olympia, and that's something we just couldn't have done before. So it's already being put to good use.
Yeah, awesome. Well, before we close, you have been very, I think, modest. And how many of those design awards have you won from the FIAS the Passive House Buildings competitions?
I think I've won 6 over the years.
That's about right.
As one of my Passive House friends reminded me, I've only got 1 year left to compete in the under 35 arena. So
better get cracking.
Yeah, better get cracking on that. But it's been really fun. You've met my team, Zack. I've had a wonderful team of really devoted people putting in the work with me, and that's why we've gotten to enjoy as many Passive House projects as we've gotten to do.
Yeah, well, some really beautiful work, very, very simple and striking, kind of sort of mid-century modern inspired architecture. That's just it's gorgeous stuff. So.
Well,
it's great to see that combined combined with high performance building, and also not ridiculous. It's like these are accessible homes as well. So it's cool to see, for sure.
You definitely have that niche of kind of essential work. essential houses where they're
Right.
not really more complicated than they need to be. But I think we find a lot of poetry and spirit in that approach.
Yeah, and it's so consistent with the basic kind of the energy design of Passive House is all about that kind of just smart simplicity. So to see that in the aesthetic design and the way the spaces work is just makes a lot of sense. That's very sasatisfying.
I like the way you thought about that. It's sort of a consistent vernacular.
Yeah.
Yeah. You must be in marketing or something.
No. Well, this has been really wonderful. Thank you, Tessa. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to talk about?
I'll put one self-promoting plug in there.
Please do.
Which is when COVID hit, we got some of that sweet PPP funding, and much of our work that had been put on hold, we brought all of our employees back, and we were able to work 2 months solidly on developing plan sets for the internet. So we're going to be rolling out a new website that is products oriented January 1.
Nice.
And we have Passive House prefab plan sets for sale on there. So we have some custom homes that are designed to be prefabricated with, very similar walls to collective carpentry, or any of the people that are doing the TJI systems like Chris Corson and such could be adapted to do that as well. And those are for sale. We're going to have a bunch of ADUs for sale, and then we also have some net zero energy homes that were sort of developed. They're not quite passive. So maybe if you've got some constraints on the site that make it difficult to achieve that certification, or maybe you've got some, other goals for the project, this can be a really good stair step, get you 70% of the way there to Passive House, 80% of the way there, and oftentimes net it out, depending on your solar arrays. So we've got a bunch of different kinds of plan sets with a lot of different goals, and then just tons of ADUs available. And they're all going to be able to just click a button and download and purchase. And we're really, really excited about it.
That is really exciting and very creative too. That's a cool business model.
Yeah, right.
To see that work.
Uncle Sam funded that one. We're just
nice
funding the rest of it. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, when that rolls out, we'll make sure that we share it on the accelerator and get the word out.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me, Zack. This is really fun.
Thank you, Tessa. Be well.
Well, thanks so much, Zack. And I'm excited about the 14th. I'll wait to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Tessa.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye. All right. That was Tessa Bradley. I hope you all enjoyed that interview. Matthew, what are your thoughts?
One of the words I wrote down when I was listening to that was fun, and it was a word that Tessa used quite a lot. And then sometimes she went on to explain things that maybe it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, describing some of the initial challenges she had. But it does make me think that she has this incredibly positive attitude, and it kind of comes across in her voice as well, that this can't have been easy. And it's not that long ago, really, it's what would it be talking, 2006, 2008, which is really not that long in the past. But she describes this time when they didn't have Passive House doors. They had to find hardware or make their own because they just couldn't get this stuff. A lot of challenges being an early adopter, and she continually described a lot of those challenges as fun. And I think that's a really important attribute to have when we are faced with challenges as early adopters, as people who are trying to push the boundaries, and we are going to come up against some resistance. But I think that's a really great way to approach that challenge.
Agreed. And I think that description of fun kind of is also related to courage, I mean, and I think that's one of the things there are many things that are remarkable about Tessa, and one of them is how much she took on at a really young age. She was in her 20s, like probably early mid-20s, when she started taking on things like owning a construction firm, and for all of us who have experience in construction firms, there's a lot. That's taken on a lot. There's a lot of liability. There are lots of responsibility to employees and all sorts of stuff. And she's
and it doesn't stop at the end of the job either.
Right.
You've got that ongoing liability of the house, and the fact that it's hopefully not going to fall down or fall apart in the next 10 years.
Right, exactly. Which actually, interestingly, is one reason I think that builders who take on passive house become so passionate about passive house construction because they know that they're building durable structures.
True.
Yeah. But I think you're right that spirit of just, okay, let's go for it. These challenges are fun. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
It's that's what she's about.
She also told the story about translating in the early days, and she was quite literally talking about translating some of the German information. But I think it goes deeper than that, because what she has done, and everyone who's gone into a new market tried to push passive house, is really translating some fairly intense physics and some building science concepts into everyday language, and communicating is a lot about translating ideas to make them more palatable. I love that story. The question you asked about how she sold passive house in those early days, and she didn't really use passive house in her answer. It was more about just making a house that's really good, wrapping it up in a woolly jumper, and adding some ventilation. And that's just such an easy concept to grasp. It doesn't overcomplicate it with all this talk about energy intensity and air tightness metrics and all that stuff that we love to geek out about. But I think it's really important that we put ourselves in the client's shoes sometimes and think, well, what's important for them? What's going to matter to those people?
Yeah, absolutely. And during those early years of adoption of passive house in the Northwest, so we're talking about like the early 2010s, right? I was at Hammer and Hand at the same time doing marketing around passive house, and a lot of our marketing was geeking out. It was, showing videos of how to, do insulation under a slab and all of the wall assembly, the details of wall assemblies and the building science behind all of it, which has its place. But meanwhile, the Artisans Group was, selling a bunch of passive house projects to clients, and they were doing things like talking about being able to walk around in bare feet during the winter.
Yeah.
So it was really, really focused on the experience of the spaces and the quality of life that brought. And so that was a really, I think, important contribution that they shared with the broader passive house community in the Northwest and nationally, actually, of, this is how we're talking about passive house, and it's really important that you do. And if you look at the kind of fundamentals of sales and thinking about, pain points for customers and stuff, that's where it's at. So really important insights.
That's a really good parallel analogy. On one hand, talking about the nuts and bolts of how do you make a good slab, how do you insulate it, and on the other side, what does that actually mean? For someone who doesn't care about edge insulation or what the makeup of the ground conditions are. It's like, you've got warm feet.
Right.
We need to be able to. We need to do both. It's no good saying, I'm going to throw out one approach and only talk about the fluffy stuff and the warm and the comfort, and because both are important. It depends on who we're talking to. And I often talk about communication to audiences and say, there's a great quote from Mark Horseman, who does the Manager Tools podcast. He paraphrases Peter Drucker that says, communication is what the listener does. And we often think it's what we do, but it's how our audience responds to the message. And if you're talking to the community at Passive House Accelerator, for example, we totally geek out on things, and that's a great platform for doing that and sharing the how. But we also need to be conscious that we're selling ideas, we're selling concepts, and if we're doing that to consumers, we need to often, not always, but often talk in a different way and communicate at a different level.
Yeah, there are some consumers, especially some early adopting, like early passive house, people who became early passive house homeowners, who were really into geeking out.
Totally.
The tech.
Sometimes they know more than the designers.
Right, exactly. But I think you're so right that communication is what the listener does is really a powerful idea. And it almost is. It just almost sounds hackneyed. But the know your audience. I mean, it's just know your. So I think that there is a, among us for folks in the Passive House community, we might ask. So that question of how do you communicate about Passive House, or what's the most important thing to talk about in Passive House? And there's no answer unless you understand who the audience is. So if you're talking about policymakers, it may be that talking about energy use intensity is important. But if you're talking to, homeowners concerned about the health of their asthmatic child, then you're having a totally different conversation. Yeah. So there's just it seems so obvious, but it's so easy to forget that.
It is, especially if you get into your spiel and you've got your little, talk that you do to sell it, and you just rattle that off.
Right.
But it needs to be customized to each time. Speaking of customization, that was one other thing that I wrote down. Just want to talk about really quickly. Tessa's really strong on custom prefab, and I know that in this part of the world, when you say prefab, a lot of people think about cookie cutter design. Right. Everything looks the same. That's at least the fear. But the reality is that Tessa and a lot of people that are utilizing prefabrication are doing bespoke custom designed, but they're just using prefabrication as a means to that end. So it's completely unique, beautifully architecturally designed homes, but just built and constructed in a more efficient and effective manner.
Yeah, exactly. And the another element of that in terms of her practice that she described was that, she now that she understands the envelope, basically the way that the collective carpentry and others are crafting these prefabbed envelopes, they're then, incorporating that into their basic design decisions when they're designing any house, so that the homeowner, depending on the local conditions and the site and stuff, they can end up deciding whether they're going to do prefab or conventional construction for that house. So it's that it reminds me of architects who are informed by Passive House, who will just make design decisions that make it easier to achieve Passive House, regardless of whether the client decides at the end of the day to go there. But there are just things around the form of the house and the orientation and other design decisions that just make it so much easier to make the jump from a code minimum house to a passive house that you just do is, so it's all kind of goes to like the notion that if you do integrated design early on in the process, it makes everything easier. It's sort of, they're somewhat parallel.
Yeah. And also not doing things that are going to make it harder, right. Like not putting thermal bridges in, which wouldn't normally be a problem, but if you, the owner's probably not even going to notice, but you can put studs or structural members in different places that are going to make it easier to minimize those things or construct the airtight layer in a more efficient manner. Just makes sense once you know that. I was going to say don't do stupid things, but it's a bit more nuanced than that, because you don't know what you don't know,
right.
And that's the benefit of having that training and the understanding of what's going to make life easier down the track.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots in there. I hope others enjoy that. I certainly did. It's great to have people like that out there doing great work, and also really appreciate Tessa and yourself giving up time to have that chat. What have we got going on in Passive House world, Zack?
Well, we've lots going on. Of course, we just launched our first Construction Tech Tuesday at the Passive House Accelerator. And just this week, it was a great session. We looked at this huge skylight and both how that skylight was incorporated into an Enerfit passive house retrofit, and the way that it opened up the design. So that was really cool. It featured Michael Ingui and his team. So super cool. Next week we're going to have a number of guests, including Matt Reisinger from the Build Show. Awesome. Yeah, talking about it's pretty great slate of speakers, and they're going to be on site sharing a big thermally broken deck on a project in Missouri. So that'll be cool. And then on Wednesday we're going to be doing the Global Passive House Happy Hour with a presentation by Morris and Hirschfield of a passive house project of theirs. So and I'll have more details and information in the show notes about that. The UK Passive House Conference will be in its final week this coming week, and with a session on Wednesday, November 25th. And then coming up is the Passive House Canada Summit, December 8th through 10th, and which will be really great programming there, and some of which will be integrated with the Passive House Accelerator. So we'll be highlighting some content at our happy hour and stuff on December 9th. So that'll be great. And I've got a bunch of other information about building science gatherings and online gatherings and educational programming around Passive House that I'll share in show notes as well.
Awesome. So much. If you haven't already joined us, make sure you do sign up and come along to the Passive House Happy Hour each week, the Global Happy Hour. It's a great collective of people to discuss ideas and get inspired by some awesome projects. Matt Reisinger, it sounds a lot like Passive House might be going mainstream there, Zack.
I think he's become really interested in Passive House. So it's pretty great to see that develop. That's sure. Awesome. And that's, the Construction Tech Tuesday is, the co-hosts are Sean St. Amour, 475 High Performance Building Supply, and Kevin Brennan, who's a rock star, air tightness and insulation and, building science practitioner, of Brennan and Brennan Insulation and Air Tightness, and then Mark Willie of T-Stud. And Mark, so this connection with Matt is through Mark, and I think Mark is actually going to be on site as well. It's going to be fun.
That's a great lineup. Yeah. It'd be worth coming along just to catch those guys in action. That's awesome stuff. Well, that's it for us for this week. Thank you very much for listening in. We'd love to get your feedback. If you've got any thoughts, comments, or ideas for future shows, please do get in touch. You can contact us at podcast at passivehouseaccelerator.com.
That's right.
Podcast at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Thank you very much. Enjoy your week, and we'll be back again with another podcast for the Passive House Podcast next week.
The Passive House Podcast and all of the programs of Passive House Accelerator are made possible by generous support from our sponsors. So I want to say thank you to them. Our founding sponsors are Baxt Ingui Architects, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, RDH Building Science, StoCorp, and Zola Windows. And our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. Thank you.